In today's gospel, we have the wedding feast of Cana, and like a lot of things in St. John's gospel, you can kind of take it as face value, or you can kind of go beyond just the face value. So, in the face value, Jesus and his mother and a couple of the disciples are there in Cana, which is a town at the time just north of Nazareth. It's at the top of the West Bank in modern day Israel, and they went to a wedding. The wedding again was something that would go on for many particular days. It's not that people would again stay up, trying to beat the record of 116 hours straight. But people would come and go, but you wanted to be one of the first of the well-wishers if you knew the family. So you wanted to be one of the first to give congratulations. So they were there and they were running out of wine. And so the mother says to the son to do something, says not his hour. The goes ahead, does something, and then the bride and the groom are taken care of. And in a way, it shows that that idea of wine being there for the couple. But, the one thing about St. John is that St. John's gospel is never that easy. It always has a lot of nice ways of going deeper. So that would be kind of like the way it would be in the synoptic gospel of Matthew and Mark and Luke. But in St. John's, you go deeper. So in St. John's gospel, you have the wedding feast of Cana basically taking place on the seventh day. So if you take from the time when Jesus was there with John the Baptist, starting in the public ministry, to the time of the wedding feast of Cana, you then have 7 days. And so if you have a new Adam in Jesus Christ, you then also will need a new Eve. So Jesus calls his mother woman, which no son would ever do. It's just like today, if you call your wife woman, or if you call your mother woman, that's not going to go over real well. Even more so at the time of Jesus. So again, that idea of recreation, therefore redeeming that which was created. Again, with a new Adam, you need a new Eve. The other thing is that you're taking a look at the wine, and one of the things in Amos chapter 9 is that talks about that abundance of wine, that the Lord will then bring about that abundance of wine. And wine, we think about joy. And the one thing about Israel at the time of Jesus is that it really had begun to lost its joy. It began to lose the joy that it once had. When we think about Israel, Israel was truly Israel back during the time of King David. And the beginning of the reign of Solomon, because Israel was to be the light of the nations. It was to bring the people into the place of Israel as the traders came down from the India and Iran, Iraq, or from the northern parts of Europe and coming down into Egypt. They then would see the people of Israel and they would say, well, wait a minute, there's something different going on here. You have this beautiful magnificent temple. You have these laws that seem to, truly make a lot of sense. It really brings about human dignity. You think about all these things. And so they would go back and they would tell the people about that. And so you had the Queen of Sheba coming to see King Solomon because she had heard about it from the traders. And so Israel was then truly Israel. But then Israel began to become like the rest of the nations, starting with King Solomon, because King Solomon had many wives, and the wives didn't want to worship the God of Israel. They wanted to worship their own God or goddess. So if it's okay for King Solomon, it's got to be okay for me. So they would begin to have the different gods and goddesses, the fertility gods and goddesses. And again, one of the things about the fertility gods and goddesses, that they'd have the sacred poles on the high mountains to get the last rays of the sun at the night and the first rays of the dawn in the morning. But again, it was not just about seeing the sun or being really into sunrise and sunset. But what it was about the sexual rites that would take place, the promiscuity, the pleasure, the vaulting up, the high, making high of pleasure. And so when you think about Israel at the time of Jesus, it had really gotten rid of the idea of Baal and Ashtaroth, but certainly you had the scribes, the Pharisees, who were being meticulous, they were being scrupulous because they wanted to bring back the Messiah. And if Joe over there was doing something wrong, it was not only on Joe, but it was also the fact that his doing would prevent the Messiah from coming. So it was very scrupulous. It was very looking introspective. And then if a person who was a Gentile background, they were basically treated as a second-class citizen. They had the court of the Gentiles, but during the time of the feast, the court of the Gentiles would be used for the market. They would be used for the changing of the coins. They would be used for the buying and selling of animals. So again, when we think about it as Israel, is that it had lost that joy. And I think the one thing we can think about today in today's environment is that we really kind of, just like the time of the Lord Jesus, we need to get that wine going. We need to have that wine ourselves, because, one of the things we think about is, kind of falling into the people of Israel, falling into the idea of Baal and Ashtaroth, falling into pleasure, trying to Christianize, the ways of the world, getting much more involved in pleasure than in the works of God, spending much more time on that than the works of God. We think about the fact that there is, although, much smaller than at the time of Jesus, there is kind of that scrupulosity as well. They have some people who are, who want to get back to the old ways, but instead of, being excited about them, they kind of critique and judge, and very scrupulous and very meticulous. So again, what we want to think about is we want to think about that joy. Are we a means of wanting to bring back people to Christ? Because too many times also we've thought about, well, we don't really need to evangelize anymore. People are Christian, but certainly when we think about the way it is today compared to where it was when I was a child, you certainly have many who have never heard of the gospel. So would they find us attractive if we presented the gospel? Would they find us repelling? How would they find us? So again, this year of the Jubilee, wanting to get back to that joy, getting back to that wine of the joy that the Lord Jesus provided for that couple at Cana. Thanks. God bless.